Hi all, and welcome to our literature lecture for the topic of women in Rome. This lecture is going to focus solely on the selections from Book 4 of the Aeneid that you read. The other two shorter poems will be discussed in the topic lecture. The Aeneid is one of my favorite poems, so I'll bring in a few things from outside Book 4. We'll begin with a little background and introduction to the Aeneid as a whole, and then move on to some important passages of Book 4. We'll then look at a small passage from Book 6. But first, some background on both Vergil, the author of the Aeneid, and the Aeneid itself. Vergil, or Publius Vergilius Maro, was born on October 5th, 70 BCE in Mantua in northern Italy. He lived and wrote in a time of political uncertainty, Julius Caesar's civil wars, Octavian's civil wars, and the rise of Octavian and Augustus. We have three major works written by him: the Eclogues, a collection of pastoral poetry, which is poetry that is written by and about shepherds in the field, published around 39 BCE. His second major work is the Georgics, a didactic poem of 4 books about farming. It was published around 29 BCE. His last work, and probably his most famous work, is the Aeneid, an epic poem in 12 books that tells the story of the Trojan hero Aeneas, who survived the destruction of the city because he was fated to found a new civilization in Italy. This poem was published in 19 BCE after Vergil's death in the same year. The Aeneid was written in the 20s BCE, the first years of Augustus's reign. We have some ancient sources that say it was written at the request of Augustus, but this isn't certain. However, even if it wasn't written at the request of Augustus, he definitely had influence over its writing. The Augustan regime can be seen throughout the poem. Aeneas's actions are shown to be necessary for and to lead to the foundation of Rome and eventually Augustus's reign. But as we will see in a few minutes, just because this text was written under Augustus's influence doesn't mean that everything in it was pro-Augustus. Finally, as previously mentioned, the Aeneid was published in 19 BCE, the same year that Vergil died. In fact, the Aeneid was not finished and still needed some editing at the time of Vergil's death. We actually have a story that Vergil's dying wish was that the unfinished Aeneid be burnt. Thankfully, his friends did not listen to him, and at the request of Augustus, published the Aeneid with just a little edits. Before we move on to the Aeneid itself, I want to talk briefly about writing poetry in the age of Augustus, since it is very different from the atmosphere of the late Republic, where poetry was seen as an activity of leisure. Under Augustus, producing poetry became something necessary for the support of the state. That is because after Actium, Augustus moved away from war and instead created an atmosphere of cultural growth in Rome. Think of it in these terms. To celebrate his victory at Actium, Augustus built the temple to Apollo next to his house on the Palatine. On the doors of the temple was Apollo, the vengeful god, killing his enemies. But the statue in the middle of the temple was Apollo, the lyre player, acting as the role of the god of culture and music. Apollo was Augustus's favorite god, and in this era it's useful to think of him as emulating the Apollo statue in the temple, the god of culture and music, rather than the vengeful god on the doors. Because of this, a formal relationship was formed between poet and princeps, though through an intermediary. Augustus set up Maecenas, his close friend and advisor, to be the patron for certain poets. From Augustan times on, the book trade became more important and the social composition of the reading public broadened. Therefore, the fame of an author continued to depend considerably on the appreciation of elite circles who determined the fashion and taste in every sector of life. For this reason, writers needed the support of leading members of this elite, both materially, if they were not themselves rich, and more generally, to enable them to become well-known and appreciated. And so Maecenas acted as literary patron for poets Augustus was interested in. This allowed Augustus to exert influence in an indirect way, but also meant that not everything that these poets said had to 100% support the Augustan regime. The three big poets in the circle of Maecenas were Vergil, Horace, and Propertius. You've read some Horace already, and we will read a lot of Propertius next week. While this support from the man in charge meant that there was now a blossoming of literature, it also had one other major effect. There was a definite lessening of freedom of speech. Since they were writing under Augustus, poets like Vergil had to be very indirect if they wanted to criticize the regime. So keeping this in mind, let's move on to the Aeneid itself. I'll start with a brief overview of the major characters, which will also act as a brief recap of everything that has happened up until Book 4. There are a lot of characters in the Aeneid, but I've chosen 7 as the major characters. Aeneas is the main character of the epic, and it is named after him. He is the leader of the Trojan refugees, and he is fated to found a city in Italy. His mother is Venus, the goddess of love, and she keeps manipulating events in the background to try and keep Aeneas safe. Aeneas' father is Anchises. Aeneas rescues him from the destruction of Troy, but unfortunately he dies as they are wandering around trying to get to Italy. Aeneas has one son, Ascanius, who's also called Iulus by his first wife, who perished in the destruction in Troy. Aeneas is plagued by troubles on his journey from Troy to Italy, mostly because of Juno, the queen of the gods. She causes a storm which shipwrecks Aeneas on the shore of Carthage. The queen of Carthage is Dido, also sometimes called Alyssa, who founded the city when her brother killed her husband, Sichaeus, and forced her into exile. She has been forced to fall deeply in love with Aeneas thanks to both Venus and Juno. Venus thinks that this is the perfect way to keep Aeneas safe in this foreign land, since Dido probably won't hurt Aeneas if she is in love with him. Juno likes this plan because she's hoping it will distract Aeneas from his true mission to found a city in Italy. So we have a Roman general with an African queen. Sound familiar? Does it seem like it'll end well? We'll see. One final character worth mentioning is Turnus, Aeneas' enemy once he lands in Italy. Turnus was engaged to Lavinia, the daughter of the king in Italy, but her father decides she should marry Aeneas instead, and Juno uses this as fodder to make Turnus angry and start a war. In the midst of this war, Turnus kills Aeneas' friend Pallas, which makes Aeneas very angry. One final note about the character of Aeneas. He's clueless. In Book 8, he is actually called Ignorus Rerum, which literally translates to clueless about things. If he were wandering around today in the age of modern technology, he would have really benefited from a quick Google search every once in a while. I'm going to be using a few Google searches that Aeneas probably would have benefited from throughout this lecture. If you find them funny, you should check out the hashtag Aeneas Googling on Twitter, as well as the @Aeneas Googling account. Also, if you really enjoy the Aeneid, the hashtag Meme the Aeneid has some really great stuff. Let's begin with the very beginning of the Aeneid. The first 7 lines of this poem are what is known as the proem, and they serve as an introduction to the whole poem. They read as follows. I sing of arms and a man, who first from the shores of Troy came to Italy and the Lavinian shores, a refugee by fate, that guy who was tossed about a lot on both land and the sea through the strength of the gods on account of the mindful anger of Juno. He also endured much war until he founded the city and brought his gods to Latium, from whence came the race from Latinus, the Alban fathers, and the high walls of Rome. These lines basically serve not only as a summary of the Aeneid, tossed about on land and sea is the voyage to Italy, endure much in war is the war when she meets Italy, and all of it because Juno's angry. It also shows a direct link between Aeneas' actions and Vergil's Rome, since his bringing the gods to Latium is the deed from which the Alban fathers and Rome came. As I mentioned these lines because they are some of the most important in Latin literature, and also for the end of the Aeneid, which we're not going to talk about. But for now, on to Book 4. Book 4 begins with Dido in despair. She is desperately in love with Aeneas, thanks to Venus and Juno, but she doesn't know that. She goes to her dearest companion, her sister Anna, and asks her what to do. She says, were I not weary of weddings, my thoughts about marriage, so all I, perhaps, could resist easily with this one point of censure. Anna, I have to confess, ever since my poor husband Sichaeus died and my brother stained our household shrines with his slaughter, this is the one man who suppled my senses and pummeled my fainting mind's resolution. These embers of long-lost fires, I recall them. I'd rather see earth yawning her bottommost chasms before me, feel the omnipotent Father's fire thrust me to the shadows, Erebus' pale, dark shadow, and the night sea of darkness, than ever violate you, my own honor, or loosen the vows I make you. He who first coupled me to himself robbed me of my love life, so let him keep it and guard it in death's lovely confinement. This statement tells us a lot about Dido. She tells us that ever since the death of her husband, she has not felt any desire for another man except Aeneas, and yet she's made a vow to never marry again. She is trying to be a univira, devoted to one man alone, a good example of a Roman woman, even if Rome didn't exist yet. So she's at a loss. Should she follow her heart and start a relationship with Aeneas, or should she stay true to her vows? Her sister Anna has some good advice. You rejected Iarbas scornfully, and other princes that Africa, gold field for triumphs, nurtures. Will you still fight off love even when it's appealing? Aren't you concerned about peoples who share these lands you've settled? We are surrounded. I think the gods gave us excellent omens when Ilian vessels sailed this way on the winds to our land. We have Juno's approval. Joined in marriage with him, what a city you'll see, what a kingdom rising in front of your eyes. In alliance with Teucrian forces, Punic Carthage will soar to the summit of glorious achievement. Ask the gods' pardon, that's all you must do. Make the right kind of offerings. Anna points out that Dido's vow not to marry again has not been well received by the kings of neighboring nations, especially Iarbas, who has asked for her hand in marriage multiple times. She suggests that this could prove dangerous in the future for both Dido and her people, as one of these men might decide to start war. An alliance with Aeneas through marriage would mean that they would not only be protected from external threats, but they would also have men and resources to build a fantastic city. All in all, it's a win-win situation. And the gods agree. Juno and Venus meet up and decide that Dido and Aeneas need to seal the deal. There's a hunt planned, and they decide to cause a huge storm so that Dido and Aeneas will be forced to shelter in the same cave and consummate their love there. And so the day of the hunt comes, and everything goes according to the gods' plans. Meanwhile, the massive rumbling of thunder begins to roil turmoil all throughout the heavens. Then follows a cloudburst of rain mixed with hailstones. Tyrian troopers and Troy's young warriors, mingling at random, and Venus's Dardan grandson, all hunt in fear for such scattered shelter as fields offer. Now it is rivers that rush down the mountains. Dido and Troy's chief come down together inside the same cavern. The earth gives the sign that the rites have begun, as does Juno, the nuptial sponsor. The torches are lightning. The shrewd sky's brilliance is witness. Hymns for the wedding are the howling moans of the nymphs upon the high peaks. That first day caused death. That first day began the disasters. Dido no longer worries about how it looks or what rumor says, no longer thinks of enjoying a secret liaison. Now she is calling it marriage. She is veiling her sin with this title. Dido and Aeneas end up in the same cave. All of the elements of a Roman wedding are present: torches, wedding songs, and her sponsor. However, it is a very ominous wedding. The torches are not real torches, but lightning, often seen as an omen. Instead of friends and family singing songs, it is the nymphs that dwell in the cave. And Juno herself, the goddess of marriage, is sponsor. But Juno doesn't really like Aeneas, so this union does not bode well. In fact, Vergil tells us this. That first day caused death. That first day began the disasters. No good will come of this union, especially since only one of the two of them considers it a marriage. As we just discussed, Dido is very concerned about her honor and reputation. So she sees all of these ominous elements as signs that she really is married. She's calling it a marriage, she's veiling her sin with a title, in order to cover up the fact that she is doing exactly what she said she would never do: break faith with her husband. Aeneas, of course, is oblivious to all of this. To him, this is just great sex in a cave with his hot queen girlfriend. Although their affair in the cave was a private event, rumor, a personified goddess, about the relationship soon spreads. Vergil actually gives us the image of a personified rumor, a winged goddess who flies around, flooding the people with many cross currents of gossip, thinking of things done, things not done, without any distinction. That some man named Aeneas has come, and his bloodline is Trojan. That lovely Dido is deeming it proper to join herself with him. That they are passing long winter hours in high life together. Cupid's slaves in shameless love, their kingdoms forgotten. Such is the gossip of the foul goddess, scatters at random on men's tongues. Quickly she twisted her devious course to the ruler Iarbas, kindled his spirit with words, and added more words, fueling his anger. Vergil characterizes rumor as a goddess who loves spreading discord. She tells of things both done and not done as if they were the same thing. She tells everyone that Dido and Aeneas are spending all of their time having sex and neglecting their duties. But since rumor makes no distinction between truth and lies, we don't actually know if this is what was really happening. However, this rumor does reach the ears of Iarbas, the king whose marriage proposal Dido had rejected multiple times. He is already angry that she has rejected him, and rumor's worms only fuel his flames. In his anger, Iarbas prays to Jupiter for help. Jupiter, who was unaware of the plotting between his wife and daughter, had no clue that Aeneas was in Carthage, not doing what he was supposed to be doing, that is, making his way to Italy to begin a new civilization there. Jupiter is angry, as Aeneas is defying the will of the gods by not following his fate, and so he sends Mercury to Aeneas to tell him to snap out of it and get back on track. Mercury finds Aeneas in Carthage, wearing a luxurious purple robe woven by Dido, his sword laying unused at his side, and building the foundations of Carthage when he should be focused on the high walls of Rome. Mercury, seeing this, is just as shocked as Jupiter was, and tells Aeneas, "You, laying the foundations of mighty Carthage," he said. "Obsessed with your wife, you're now building a lovely city for her. You've forgotten your own obligation and kingdom. Heaven's own king, who spins both the sky and the earth with his power, sends me to you himself, directly from gleaming Olympus, tells me himself to convey these instructions through the swift-moving breezes. What do you hope you can build, you deserter, in Libya's deserts? If, in fact, glory from such great deeds doesn't fire up your spirit, being indifferent yourself to the plaudits earned by this hard work, think of the growing Ascanius, the dreams of Iulus to cherish. He is your heir. Thus Rome's fine earth and Italy's kingship stand as his due." Mercury reminds Aeneas that these are not the walls he should be building, and that in his love he's forgotten his true fate. He will build nothing lasting in Libya since he is fated to found a city in Italy. Mercury doesn't think that this will be enough motivation for Aeneas, so he also reminds him of his duty to his son. By forgetting his fate, he is neglecting his son and denying him his inheritance, a kingdom in Italy. While Aeneas might have Dido in Carthage, Ascanius has nothing. This message shocks Aeneas, and he's at a loss what to do. He needs to leave, but doesn't know how to approach Dido. So he comes up with what he thinks is the best solution. While this might seem like a joke, it is actually what Aeneas decides to do. Not that Aeneas could have replied, for the sight left him speechless, senses lost, hair bristling in shock, voice frozen in locked jaws. Still, though, he burns to get out, to escape from the lands that delight him, stunned by the mighty force of the god's commandment and warning. Wondering what he should do, how he dare go round the besotted ruler with some explanation, or find ways of broaching the subject. This way and that, he channeled his swift mind, testing his options, every alternative he could conceive. He approached from all angles. This, as his thoughts vacillated, appeared the most forceful decision. So he calls Menesius, Sergestus as well, and the valiant Serestius. Then he instructs them to refit the ships, muster crews on the seashore, ready their weapons. No word must get out. The entire re-equipment must be disguised. In the meantime, since excellent Dido knew nothing and wouldn't dream that their love affair was being shattered, he himself would test some approaches and find the most tactful times for a talk and how best he could frame it. Vergil makes it clear that Aeneas really has no intention of explaining himself to Dido. He just wants to get out of there as fast as possible and knows that Dido, in her lovesick state, would make a quick departure hard. So while he contemplates a way to get around the besotted queen, he tells his men to secretly pack up the ships and get ready to leave. With his decision made, Aeneas thinks he is in the clear and back on track to do what he is fated to do. But, quis fallere possit amantem, Vergil asks. Who could fool a lover? Dido is no dummy, and she sees these preparations being made. She's enraged and goes to confront Aeneas. Dido accosts Aeneas. Was it your hope to disguise, you perfidious cheat, such a monstrous wrong, to get out, with no word said, from this land that I govern? You are not bound by our union of love. Are you not bound by our union of love, by the hand you once gave me, nor does Dido, doomed to a cruel death, now detain you? Why so much work on your fleet? Constellations tell us it's winter, yet you are rushing to put out to sea, cruel man, while the north winds rule. Why is this? Were you not in pursuit of some other man's plowlands, unknown homes, and if ancient Troy were still in existence, would Troy then be the goal of your fleet on the water's expanses? Could you be running from me? Let me urge you with tears by your right hand, thanks to my pitiful conduct, that's all I have left now to swear by, urge you by love we have shared, by the steps we have taken to marriage. She continues, if I ever have earned your thanks for services rendered or given you any pleasure, I beg you, if prayer still has meaning, pity this falling house, shrug off your present intention. Libyan tribesmen, Nomen sheiks all loathe me. The Tyrians hate me on your account, and on your account I have ruined my sole claim to stellar distinction, my chastity's good name, once honored even by rumor. I'm dying, yet you desert me, house guest, the lone name left for the man I called partner in marriage. What should I wait for? My brother Pygmalion's attack on my city? Or till I'm captured and read by that Gaetulian monarch Iarbas? If I'd, at least before you ran off, conceived from our closeness some child fathered by you, if there were a baby Aeneas playing inside my halls, whose face might in some way recall you, I would not feel so wholly trapped yet wholly deserted. Dido is angry. She's seen the secret preparations and accuses Aeneas of trying to sneak away, and asks him why he would break the bond they formed in the cave. Plus, she points out, it's winter, which is a very dangerous time for sailing. She then asks him some very important question. Is he really leaving because of his fate, or because he no longer loves her? She does this by asking him if he would sail to Troy in such dangerous weather if Troy still stood. She reminds him of their marriage and begs for pity, since she gave up everything, including her reputation and her safety, for him, since by entering this affair she not only broke her vows to never remarry, but also angered all the men she had previously rejected because of that vow. She thought Aeneas would be her partner in founding this city, but it turns out he was just her guest. Finally, she points out that she hasn't even gained anything from the relationship. She's not pregnant, so she will not have a reminder of him nor an heir for her country. At these words, Aeneas is taken aback. Aeneas responds immediately to her accusations, denying everything. That I owe you, my ruler. All that you could listen your speech I would never deny. You have earned it. Memory will never elicit regret for my missing Alyssa while I remember myself, while my spirit rules this body. Now a few words in defense. This escape, slipping out like a bandit, that is not what I had hoped. Don't twist my words. And I never formally wed you, nor did I endorse any contract as husband. If fate's orders allowed me to live out the life of my choosing, putting my anguish to rest as I myself would have wanted, Troy is the city where I'd be now, looking after my own folks' relics and remnants. The great house of Priam would still stand in spirit. My own hands would have rebuilt Pergamum's shrines for the vanquished. But great Italy now is a land that Apollo of Grynia and Lycian's oracles tell me to seize. It is Italy's great land. This is my love and my homeland. If you, since you are Phoenician, focus your gaze on the towers of Carthage, your Libyan city, why does the vision of Teucrians settling the land of Ausonia evil your eye? We too have the right to seek overseas kingdoms. Each time night cloaks the earth with opaque, dank shadows of spectral darkness, and fire-born stars rise upward, my father Anchises' angry face in my dream chastises me, stalks me with terror, as does my son Ascanius. The damage I've done his dear person, cheating him out of his destined Hesperian kingdom and croplands. Jupiter now has dispatched his divine intercessor, who bears me personal orders. I swear by them both, through the swift-flowing breezes. I myself, in clear day's light, saw Mercury enter these very walls, and on my own ears heard each word he was saying. Stop enraging me, and do yourself with all this complaining. Going to Italy is not by my choice. Aeneas with a lie. He claims he had never intended to sneak away, when literally 100 lines earlier he told his men to make preparations to leave in secret. He also tells her that he never considered their relationship a marriage. It was just an affair for him. He then drives the knife even further. He says that even if he were free to do what he wanted, he wouldn't stay with her. He'd go back to Troy and rebuild. But he can't even do that because he is fated, forced by the gods to go to Italy. This is his love now. He then asks her why she would begrudge him to do the exact same thing she did when she was forced to leave after her brother's coup. Build a civilization of his own, neglecting the fact that up until now he was perfectly fine to help her build hers. He then brings up pietas, his duty to his family. If he doesn't fulfill his fate, he is neglecting this duty, both to his family now and, it is implied, his future family, aka Augustus. He ends with what will become his refrain. Going to Italy is not his choice. These are the only words Aeneas speaks to Dido in this entire book, and the first of only 2 times he speaks at all. The second is to tell his men that it is time to go when Mercury comes to him again. Dido has a pretty strong reaction. Dido is even more angry than before. She tries in many ways to change Aeneas' mind, including sending her sister to try and convince him, but nothing worked, and so the fires of her passion turn to burning rage. She goes a little crazy, starts seeing things like blood clots and the ghost of her husband, and decides there's only one solution. She has to kill herself. She then, in total surrender to pain, became pregnant with madness. Passing a sentence of death, she determines the time and the method with her own counsels. Yet she, when addressing her sorrowful sister, masks all trace of her plans and presents a facade of serene hope. I've found a way, dear soulmate, so say well done to your sister. I'll either get him back or get rid of the love that he causes. Dearest, I swear by the gods and by you, by your sweet life, my soulmate, I didn't want to invite and embrace such practice of magic. Build me in secret an open-air pyre in our innermost courtyard, then place upon it arms of the man, which that unrighteous villain fixed on our bedroom walls, other gear he cast off, and the bridal bed where I came to my grief. The idea is to kill, says the priestess, all of the odious memories that impious man left to haunt me. Dido doesn't want to alarm her sister, so she does so under the guise of a magic ritual. This ties Dido to one of the other famous women from Greek mythology that Vergil uses as inspiration for her, Medea, the witch who falls in love with Jason, then gets revenge on him when he leaves by killing their children. But Dido doesn't have any children to kill. She is only pregnant with madness, so she has to kill herself. She asks Anna to build her a pyre and to put everything associated with Aeneas on it, his weapons he left behind, other gear, and even their bed. She's going to burn it to rid herself of feelings for him. It's very ironic that the woman who just railed against Aeneas for tricking her decides to use the exact same tactics with the person she claims to love, her sister. Anna does as she is asked, unaware that she is prepping a funeral pyre for her sister. When Dido sees Aeneas sailing off, she climbs to the top of the pyre, grasps his sword, and utters a curse against him and his descendants. This is my prayer. These final words I express with my lifeblood. Tyrians, drive with relentless hate against his stock and every future brood, and dispatch them as ritual gifts to my ashes. No love must ever exist between our two peoples, no treaties. Rise from my bones, my avenger, and there will be an avenger, so you can hound these Dardan settlers with hot fire and cold steel, now, or someday in the future, whenever that strength coalesces. Menace of coast against coast, of waters hurled against waters, arms against arms I invoke. Let them fight, and their grandsons. Deathbed curses seem to be very effective. Dido asks the Tyrians and their descendants to forever be opposed to Aeneas and his descendants, the Romans. Does anyone remember who was Rome's biggest enemy, with whom they fought 3 wars in the middle of the Republic? That's right, Carthage. Dido also swears that an avenger will be born from her bones, who will hound these Dardan settlers now or in the future. Who do you think this Carthaginian avenger is? Yep, Hannibal. In effect, Vergil sets up Aeneas as the reason why Carthage is hostile to the Romans and makes him the cause of the 3 Punic Wars, all because he abandoned Dido. Having thoroughly cursed Aeneas, Dido finally prepares to kill herself. Dido, fearful yet crazed at the ghastly extent of her planning, frantically glances about her with bloodshot gaze, and impending death now discolors her quivering cheeks with its pallor and blotches. Bursting through the doors to the innermost courtyard in a frenzy, she clambers to the top of the pyre, then unsheaths the Dardan sword blade. This was a special gift she'd requested, but not for the purpose. Here, catching sight of the Ilian clothing and bed so familiar, she, for an instant, delayed deadly purpose in tears and reflection. Fell, ghost-like, on the bed where she uttered a few final phrases. Spoils that were once so sweet, while fate and its god gave permission, take yourself to this soul. Cut me loose from all this anguish. Fortune assigned me a curse. I have run it. My life is accomplished, and now the image of me that will pass beneath this earth has its greatness. I have laid the ground for a famous city. I have seen my own walls rise. I have avenged my husband and punished my brother, my foeman. So fulfilled, to excess, if only Dardanian vessels had never touched on the shores of my country. This said, she pressed her face to the covers. We will die without vengeance, but let us die. This is it. This is the path that I chose to end to the dead world. This is the fire that, far out to sea, the cruel Dardanian's eyes must absorb. He must carry with him these omens of our death. Such were her words, and while she was speaking, attendants observed her slumped on the sword, saw the blade and saw the foam streaming from her body, saw that her hands were drenched. Dido, clutching the very sword we last saw at Aeneas' side when Mercury came to him, gives this final speech in which she points out that if Aeneas hadn't landed on her shores, she would have accomplished what she was still trying to do. She already has a famous city and has seen her own walls rise. He has not. She then wishes that Aeneas will see the smoke from her pyre as he sails away and carry that image with him as an omen of his trip. With this, she dies, and her sister finds her. Juno pities her in her last moments and sends Iris, her messenger, down to release her from the mortal life and bring her to the underworld. Beyond her very accurate predictions for the future rivalry between Rome and Carthage, Dido was right about something else. Aeneas and his men do see the smoke from her pyre as they sail away. But because he is clueless, Aeneas doesn't quite get what the smoke means. Meanwhile, Aeneas, certain, was holding the middle of the sea with his fleet, and was cutting waves, black with the winter wind, looking back at the walls, which were illuminated by the flames of unlucky Alyssa. What caused this large fire was unknown, but pain is cruel when great love is dishonored, and the hearts of the Trojans knew by this omen what a raging woman is capable of. Vergil is careful to point out here that the cause of the fire is unknown, but that it probably has something to do with Dido, and so Aeneas believes his relationship with Dido is done, even if he does not yet know about her death. He continues to sail around the Mediterranean and visits the grave of his father. There he learns that before he can come to his final destination in Italy, he must go to the underworld to speak to the shade of his father. And so the Trojans make landfall in Cumae, in southern Italy, where there is a lake that has an entrance to the underworld. He enters the underworld with the help of the Sibyl, a prophetess of Apollo, and a golden branch, which he had to pluck from the tree to prove he is worthy of entering the underworld. And the branch hesitates before breaking off the tree, so is Aeneas really worthy? One of the first places they see in the underworld is the grove of women who died for love, and he comes upon a surprising figure, Dido. Aeneas is shocked to see Dido in the underworld and speaks to her with regret about the way things ended between them. Unfortunate Dido, therefore true news came to me that you had died and that you had ended your life by the sword. Alas, was I the cause of your death? I swear by the stars, by the gods above, and if there is any faith under the earth, against my will, queen, I left your shores. But the commands of the gods, which now compel me to go through these shades, through places rough with neglect and this infernal night, force me with their power. Nor am I able to believe that I brought you such great despair with my departure. Halt your footsteps and don't remove yourself from my sight. Whom are you fleeing? By fate, this is the last speech I will say to you. Aeneas reveals that he had heard rumor of her death, but didn't know that it was true. He even mentions the sword she uses to kill herself, but never quite realizes that it is his own sword that she used. He yet again repeats his favorite line, I didn't leave you willingly. He also claims he doesn't believe that his departure would cause her much grief, when both her first speech to him and all of her repeated attempts to stop him from leaving suggest otherwise. Basically, Aeneas, with his "this is the last time we'll ever be able to talk" line, seems to expect her to respond, and Dido does have a pretty great response. Silence. Dido says nothing. With such words, Aeneas was trying to soften her spirit, burning and glancing sharply, and was trying to incite tears. But she turned away from him and held her eyes fixed to the soil, nor when he began speaking was her expression more affected than if harsh granite nor Marpesian cliffs stood there. Finally, she tore herself away and, hostile, fled back into the shady grove, where her first husband, Sichaeus, responded to her suffering and loved her equally. The last line of this episode is a very indirect statement condemning Aeneas' actions against Dido. Sichaeus responds to her suffering, unlike Aeneas, who, when approached by Dido, shrugged her off and left anyway. In addition, he loves her equally, unlike Aeneas, who saw what she considered as a marriage as just a fling. and thus ends the great love affair of Dido and Aeneas, for real this time.